Oh yeah, I'm here. Let me put on a little bit of that background sound. Yeah, hello, Raksha. Just getting settled in. Had to go out for a drive. Hello, Doc. I had to postpone the stream an hour so I could take a drive and get inspired, and I managed to do that. So I guess I can put myself on the camera now. There. And I come back here and find out how long a lag that is. Hello, Mari. Tuesday afternoon. Okay, so it's about a 15-second delay. Hello. Hello, Lee. I've been showing up in a few live chats, you know, Bleak Project, other amusing things. And invariably, I see Lee there also. And it's good to see a friendly. Hey Doc, that was a good stream you did the other night. I really enjoyed that. I mean, that really went a while, and you know there was a dedicated group there. It was a really that was a good little gathering. Doc Illusion did a live stream, a couple of, I don't know, I have no idea of time, but he did one a few days ago at least, and it started late. I think it was after midnight or something. And hey, Vernon, good to see you. It's good to see you here. And he kind of, I just saw it. YouTube now has this little notification with your subscriptions that they'll have you like a little live icon going on there. So I saw the live icon, clicked in, and he was just getting started. And it was about a 3-hour ride. Really well done. You did really good stream of consciousness there, Doc. And of course, doing a little tarot, always it makes things fun. People were really wowed. I really enjoyed being a part of that. Vern, are you still with us? Because a lot of times I see you pop in. Yeah, that drive was really good. Would have liked to have, when I was upstate New York, I had a backyard to go walking in, but the backyard here is surrounded by trailers and street lights, and gets a little bit, it's not very meditative. So I drove on the dark roads. Hey, okay, so Vernon, you are here. And I'm still picking through, you know, the Nag Hammadi texts, looking for something that I could say, hey, you know, besides John Lamb Lash, there's something to read here, but so far I haven't found one. It's interesting going through the Nag Hammadi texts. And I'm being told I have bad video settings, but there's not a whole lot I can do with my very humble internet connection here. I did have some, I closed down every single video that was queued up, so I had maximum bandwidth. So anyway, let me just see what's going on over here. Okay, we got 7 people. I've been terrible with my comments this week. Usually I go in and kind of exchange this. This past week kind of flew by. Candlemas had a really unique energy, and I spent that day quite meditatively. Because it's kind of, you know, it's a regeneration phase. Candlemas, more light. Depending on where you were in Europe, February 2nd was, you know, kind of like you might think about doing some things, because the frosts are going to be ending pretty soon, and then as you go north, it gets a little bit different. But it's always been seen as a time of regeneration when nature is awakening. Tolkien, the elves had 5 seasons. Actually, I guess everybody had 5 seasons, but there was a short spring period that was called the stirring, Stirring, the stirring, when nature starts to stir again. And I think it's like, just a few, like 2 weeks, maybe, less than that. It's a very short duration of time in the year they allot. And I always thought that was sweet, that they had a separate kind of idea of when the earth is awakening. And that's actually what Candlemas is. Candlemas now is this little 6-week period between, February 2nd and when spring starts. And so Candlemas is kind of the stirring. Out of the ashes. Yeah, the bugs. I actually like warm weather enough that I'll put up with bugs. Plus, I make my own insect repellent. It's a half citronella, half eucalyptus. I put it in alcohol to dilute it, and I have a bug spray that is really effective and very nice smelling. Eucalyptus and citronella blend in a way that I've actually had people go, I could spray this on me as a cologne. Where if you use citronella straight, most people it's very, very heavy. The eucalyptus really lifts it up without hurting its repellent effect, because eucalyptus is repellent in its own right. So Mari, you shouldn't be too hard to run into some eucalyptus oil where you are. Well, if you want to put any more thoughts around Out of the Ashes, Raksha, I'll be glad to see what comes of that. And see what also, now that you've kind of put it there, see what develops as I go into my different little streams of thought here. Yeah, and for an insect repellent, Mari, it seems like the heavier glob. If you're into the different, there's so many species of eucalyptus. The radiata is the most pleasant eucalyptus to work with as a scent, but the globulus, or the really heavy one, is actually the more repellent. And then there's a pharmaceutical grade that is actually very well configured, and it's usually cheaper because it's not like a high grade aromatherapy oil, and that actually is probably the best to mix with citronella, which sells fairly cheaply. Citronella is not an expensive oil. It's a plant that produces copious amounts of essential oil, as opposed to rose, where you need a whole lot of roses just to get like an ounce of rose oil. Citronella just gives up the oil. Excuse me. Let me get to my mic mute for a second. Yeah, those mic mutes work pretty well. So, I guess while I was out driving, I was thinking about Nag Hammadi texts and what I see when when I'm reading through them. And I was just thinking, there's really 2 very clear narratives. There is the ancient mother-based narrative, of which the Sophianic narrative to me is, in the opinion of a lot, is kind of the clearest and most lucid, lucid and well elucidated, and put into a good system with initiates. But there was that kind of like the ancient system, and then there is the new system, basically, the Yahwist system that kind of comes out of the bowels of the Anunnaki thing. And so they're so different. They're such different worldviews and cosmologies that even when they get mashed together, they're really obvious to me. They're very obvious to me. Really obvious. They smell different. They come from different sources. They use there's a lot of different language, conceptual language. So there are themes, especially in out of the Babylonian stuff, which is what I'm going to call the Yahwist stuff. There's a lot, righteousness. There's all this very stiff kind of responses and language. It's just really, really clear to me. And then what's also very clear is that in the Levant, in the Palestine, Syria, in that area of the world, apparently even to Turkey, which is just north of Syria, that there was a kind of like a Jesus fever, and it seemed to have been the Essenes had a teacher of righteousness they were expecting, and apparently there's some very charismatic, high spirit carrying men in the area, and it ignited kind of like a Jesus fire. And you have those different kinds of Jesuses. In the Nag Hammadi, you kind of get what I will call a Gnostic Jesus. And then when you start going into other systems, you'll see different like the Essene Jesus is much more about righteousness, and would be tied in more into the Old Testament. Okay, I'm just gonna. I see some good stuff. When I see Raksha's name there, I figured let me see what inspiration. So give me a moment, please. Yeah. Okay, Sandy. Well, the Jesus fever. There was obviously some very charismatic people in the Levant. That's really the word I like best to use. It's kind of Sinai, Palestine, Syria, into some Iraq, southern Turkey, and it's very, you can see it's very much part of the Nag Hammadi works, but that's from a different cauldron. that's a different ferment, and so what I am as I'm starting to find something in the Nag Hammadi text to get excited about is as a piece, as a whole piece. I'm very excited about the Nag Hammadi text because they brought the concept of Gnostic into the language, and then people were able to do a little further digging, and people like John Lash, but John Lash is the one who's kind of like out there and bringing the narrative and putting it in our face, and I am quite grateful to him for that. So the Nag Hammadi texts are this kind of interesting blend of Gnostic thought with Levantine Babylonian thought. So it makes it quite a mishmash. I can see why a lot of people from the monotheistic traditions, when they find the Nag Hammadi text, they find a form of what they kind of come from with a lot more sanity and also a lot more complexity. One of the biggest challenges sometimes, especially for very curious people, is when you really start asking some questions. There's seems like a limited amount of material as far as kind of straight answers, where when you read the Nag Hammadi text, they're describing all kinds of stuff. You know, they got all kinds of heavens figured out, and circles, and complexity. And the complexity is the Babylonian or Archontic signature, how complex things get. As far as a map and a mythos to live in. I'm following the live chat a little bit. But I really, I feel for somebody who a couple hours ago was wondering whether or not I was going to be able to pull this off, the drive was just amazingly therapeutic. You know, no computer. I don't take my phone with me. Some people might go, what if you break down? Well, I do a little something before I get in the car so that doesn't happen. Well, let me wait. I can always get back into things. Boy, isn't this nice? This little owl mug. As I'm watching the replay as 15 seconds after I take my sip, and I really like it. It was one of the people who remembered my birthday. Of course, when you don't tell everybody what your birthday is, it's kind of hard for them to say anything. Okay, so I'm kind of following a little bit in the chat about, I guess, Doc and Lee are talking. So I guess it was, if you feel like typing, I understand. Here I am at a mic and you have to type. His guest was a troll, Lee. Okay, I guess so. Where did Michael? I guess Michael Tsarian had a live stream somewhere, Doc. Is that what? Or I guess I can ask you, Lee, too. You're pretty good with typing. David Whitehead and Michael were live the other day. A few of us were there. It was a good dialogue. He did his first live stream. It was Troll Central, says Doc. There were a few trolls, but it wasn't that bad. I've seen way worse than that. Yeah, Lee, I have seen, I mean, some of... Yeah. There's been a few live streams going on, especially with regards to some of the, you know, stuff going on with, let's call it USA domestic news. Oh my God! But nothing like sitting in it, being in a chat with, like, you know, anywhere from 500 to 1,500 people. Stream of thought consciousness just going by. Fortunately, in the slow settings, so you can actually read it. Wow, what a sociological study. Oh my. What a sociological study. Whew. Man, there's some really powerfully, emotionally good-hearted people. But they were reminding me of the title of my last stream, which was Clueless in Creation. Trolls versus Blue Avians. Yeah, I think one of the funniest things is that the Blue Avians have now exited the stage. Hello, Big P99. From what I can tell, the Blue Avians have exited the stage, and I think the Argarthans or something like that, you know, some inner world people are next up on the disclosure plate. What, I mean, that's quite a show. And I'm on Minds.com, and there's somebody, I mean, when he's not posting some of the most gross kind of anime porn or whatever, he posts David Wilcox and Corey Good stuff. How's that for broad spectrum? Oh, hello, Jessica. So yeah, I rolled, and then Leak Project. Leak Project had a live stream last night that Lee was at. I was there for part of it. I can have a few moments of fun there, and then it's just, you can either have fun or get stuck reading what comes up in the chat and then need bleach for your brain. Oh yeah. I mean, I was on some, this other kind of live stream, and people were giving play by play. Yeah, I've had quite. I think that's why I needed a drive. I had been immersed. Yeah, Gary Busey. That's right. Yeah, he's Gary Busey. Getting immersed with, the regular people, the salt of the earth. I don't know, just salt was starting to dry my skin out, dry my brain out more like it. I was getting a little pickled. So I need to take a drive, reset, and then kind of come back into my more mystical world. Hey, Thomas. Young buck in the house. Bucking around. Hello, no knowledge. That doesn't. It reads better than it speaks. No knowledge. Doc, when you're covering the Nag Hammadi, I love it. Because you really want to see somebody engaged in their spirit and their heart, and whatever that kind of modality is beautiful. I think the interesting thing about a lot, what I find about the Nag Hammadi, it's very kind of pleroma oriented. I was listening to Miguel Connor. Miguel Connor has a pretty cool YouTube called Aeon Gnostic Bites. And the last one he had on was somebody discussing Gnostic movie themes, and he has his producer Vance on, and they kind of hash things out. And I really like Miguel. Miguel is great, and he does these really dramatic intros, and fairly good pretty good outros too. And the interesting thing was they were about the Gnostic theme that they were getting, and they particularly, apparently, I haven't seen it. I guess it's that Dark City or whatever. It's a Batman movie. And apparently that is very Gnostic, and they were identifying who different characters were and who was a Sophia character. It was interesting. But what was interesting was when Miguel got to the part, and he goes, yeah, but even after they defeat the bad guys, there's no, celebration and going back to the pleroma. It's kind of like it stays, it ends, like the bad guys are defeated, and here we are still in this world. And I would have to say there is a certain very Gnostic aspect to that, because apparently Dark City is about defeating the Archons. So I guess in Dark City they do defeat the Archons somehow. And then, it's kind of like, well, and so what do we do next? And and where Miguel was like, we should return to the Pleroma, or it should be paradise or something. And to me, again, this is the Levantine Babylonian salvation stuff coming in. It would seem to me that if we finally got rid of the archons, we would get down to building the real world instead of the one that the Gnostics are always railing against. I'm railing against it too. It's a good thing to rail against, but you got to know what it is. And so for me, if they'd actually if in that Batman movie they actually defeated the archons, well, then the thing is, yeah, we don't shoot off to the Pleroma. We finally have the Earth back. Now it's time to create our heaven here. Never, and even, from the Sophianic narrative that John Lash delivers, the experiment of casting, the panspermia out into the Kenoma, or the arms of the galaxy, was to ultimately have a consciousness that could hold the consciousness of an aeon, or the aeons, or even the originator. Because the originator is an interesting concept all its own. And they do get into that, but the originator is to me, is not something really so much to talk about. It's something to experience as something that's ubiquitous. And almost not wanting to be defined. Although if you catch it, it winks at you. But for me, like again, taking a movie script where apparently the archons get defeated, then it would be, the whole thing is now you have a world that needs repairing and reclaiming. That can be joyful work, but boy, it will be work. And so that's to me what I see, that kind of thought, when it creeps into Gnostic thought, is odd to me. Again, it's almost like, well, we defeated the bad, don't we get to go back to heaven? Where I see the whole creation of a being like ourselves that can hold this spark is, no, we're branching out. We're going into the dead matter. We're going into Kenoma and bringing the divinity as we are to it. We're expanding. It's not like, oh, job done, go home. Like I said, I do believe there's probably a folding in cycle. Seems like we have plenty of things to do before we have to even get there. And I think when the kind of sagacious, energetic self that we can be, it would almost be like, yeah, it's time to restart. It wouldn't be like, oh, I guess we're all going to die. No, restart, because we'd be in a kind of a place where it'd probably be like a certain convergence of consciousness that would create that restart. Okay, let me read a few comments here. Oh yeah, it was nice. That's right. Marie was there too. That was great. That's right. Marie. That was great. Yeah. Oh yeah, the closing of the Dow, I guess on Friday, which was like at 666 or 665.21 or something, which rounding off would not give you 666. You'd have to be past 0.5. But there are. It's amazing. There's quite a few Christians in the Truther community, and they hold their own in the chats. And obviously, for certain people, 666. I mean, we all will kind of perk up a little bit, but once you perk up and you go, oh, there it is. What you do with it Varies from person to person. Yep. That's so good, Raksha. Technically, it is not what the Christ said, but how it has been presented to fit certain narratives. Yeah, the what Rome did with that narrative certainly produced a lot of misery. Yeah, you're right about that carbon atom. There's some 666 right there. And that's why, to me, I mean, there's a lot of boogeyman in the Babylonian stuff. The boogeyman is all over the Babylonian stuff. Gnostics don't have the ancients, the initiates. They didn't have a boogeyman. We have the archons. We don't have boogeymen. They were well identified, known how they operated, how what to do to negate it. People knowing what archontic speech would sound like. So if somebody starts going there, you go, hey, maybe we should sing over you because you got something nasty going on here. Yeah, the funny thing is I think I'm even a harsher critic of the Nag Hammadi text than John Lash is. But I need, again, I'm still making my way through it. When I have read all of it, and that's why I have to qualify it, because I might be, at one point go, I guess I was a bit of an ass. But I'm willing to have that opinion of myself if I've said something that would, in review, I'd go, you really made an ass of yourself. But I'm working through it. Again, it's kind of difficult to read stuff that you don't enjoy. Oh, you're not digressing, Doc. As I said, for me, having other Gnostics to throw our ideas around, just to kind of have a Gnostic-y kind of conversation, because there aren't many Gnostic kind of conversations going on, and again, the Nag Hammadi text is a really good. It's very easy to kind of come out of something of the organized religions and come into the Nag Hammadi text and have a lot of familiar territory there. JPB. What is JBP, Thomas? Oh, Jordan Peterson. Well, to me, what was great about the Gnostic thing with mystery schools was that nobody was expecting anybody to believe anything. Gnosis was about you had an experience. You've had and the ultimate initiation was the experience of the Sophianic light that is actually all around us, and it was. Yeah, different, and there was so much shamanic constant journeying and then discussion. It wasn't like one person. These are people who, who would do journey and come and just constantly piece together the map. It was pretty extraordinary. Yeah, Jordan Peterson. I know Jordan Peterson's a smart guy, but he's a little bit of a cornball for me. Yeah, and he's, I mean, again, it's sometimes hard for me not to look at certain people and go, do you have a howdy doody haircut? But that's just crazy old me, the wild man. But actually, I don't really care. I just guess it's that old hippie in me. I think I've actually read the Essene Gospel of Peace many, many years ago. Probably, I would, if I had to pick a date, it would probably be 1989, 1990. The Essenes were a Zadokite sect. They were the righteous ones. They, they had a war. They had that whole apocalyptic, war. Hello, Niche. You might want to reground me, Doc, about what it is you're not sure about that I said. Because I'd like, I'm always looking to re-examine what I say. Yeah. I'm still here. I just put up a picture for a second to get my face off the screen. I really should learn how to use my GIMP editor a little better. Probably make that Can't You Hear Me Gnostic easier to see by having a background in it, but I like that picture. There are many faces to Sophia or Gaia, but I really like that, the way that is depicted. I like all the kind of, white plasma streams coming off of her, looking down at herself as the earth. Yeah, I like that. Hey, Kalindal. Thanks for leaving the comment. I appreciate everybody leaves comments. It's funny putting that peace sign there. Yeah, I'd like to read that again. I mean, it was nice enough. That's why I put my picture off, so I didn't, wouldn't be recorded smoking. But so what's really, I guess, the other thing that crossed my mind while I was driving was the creation stories that are in the Nag Hammadi texts. And it's very clear to me that someone, that some other group of people, beings, entities, did create their own version of a human. I mean, to me, there are numerous texts. To me, probably the earliest indication of that is when Cain is thrown out of Eden or leaves Eden and takes a wife. In other words, he goes and takes a human wife because he was a little concerned about people would kill him. Who were those people? Humans, the original humans, the earth humans, the ones that arose. And who knows what kind of different tinkerings may have gone on. They all fit into the plan. Once you're here, you really can't be part of a propagating humanoid species without being able to tap into your specific species morphogenetic field. This is a nice concept to bring up, morphogenetic fields. If Rupert Sheldrake wrote a book called The Science of Life, I think it was, to explain the morphogenetic field. I got it years after I'd been exposed to the concept of the morphogenetic field. It just came to me as a download about understanding species and morphogenetic fields, the storage, how it expresses itself in biology. There's a whole kind of holistic template that is there. And in the Sumerian texts and Akkadian texts, those cuneiform texts, go through different iterations. They have a few different scenarios. But usually there's kind of experimentation, some failures, couldn't crawl, couldn't eat, couldn't do this. Originally they're androgynous, and then they're that. And I think there's a little bit of conflation in certain amounts of like what the nature of the beings were. But it's clear to me that there was what I call Homo domesticus created. Then we also have the issue, no matter where you go in the world, and it could be in Siberia, it could be in northwest China, it could be in New Zealand, it could be in the Andes, but we're talking about like kind of the reddish, blonde-haired, 7-foot. They're calling them giants, but they were so all over the place, makes you wonder. And then you have the megalithic structures. It's starting to look more and more like the original stock of humans. We're a rather robust and kick-ass kind of group, which is why they stashed those skeletons. You would think, an incident, there was like a race of giants. You would think, why would they hide that? How about if the race of giants was us? How about if that was our original form? And then according to Genesis and others, they created this little midget, or a smaller human, because it is very interesting when the Israelites are returning to their promised land, and they have the Anakim, and they're reconnoitering, and they're going, we're like grasshoppers next to them. So it makes you think this is a kind of runty group. They write it like, as if like they're the normal height, but they're surrounded by all these really big people. And it's really obvious that the Israelites come from the manufactured breed. And it seems they were not as big as the people who lived on the land. And so these are just, this was some of the stuff that was coming to me while I was driving. But it's kind of been hiding there because, you know, I listen to a lot of things and about, you know, Nephilim and all those, you know, all that stuff. And some of it depends. Sometimes I go there and some people are doing Nephilim from like really, really heavy scripture. I can't sit through that. But when allusions to scripture are fine. And this, so I've listened to some pretty good stuff. And the fact that these giants, I haven't been reading the chat, so the fact that these giants just seem to be showing up everywhere. It just seems to me that there was a more robust form of us. And even in the book by Anton Parks, which is him doing his decoding of various Sumerian and Akkadian texts. And one of the problems they had when they finally got their irrigation systems built, and this is before they made the Lulu. Lulu is one of the words that they have for the creature they created. And before they had the Lulu, they were doing their own work. Matter of fact, it's why they had the Igigi. The Igigi were a lower caste of whatever this group was that were doing all the labor. And, you know, they were digging irrigation ditches, you know, like through Mesopotamia, so that the Tigris and Euphrates rivers could be used to irrigate the fields that they were building to feed themselves. And apparently they got, you know, once they had the work done, the gardens were really producing. And there's actually, in the Sumerian or Akkadian texts, them complaining about the humans that were coming and raiding their gardens. And because they were coming out of the forest, they were bringing all of these organisms that, you know, a robust wild flora could tolerate. But when they go into this pristine garden, and like, you know, even if one of us had a garden, you know, if you bring stuff in from the forest, it could get a little dicey. It's kind of like its own little ecosystem. Sometimes, and not usually more delicate and not as robust as a real natural ecosystem. So they had problems, and you know, diseases came to their very pristine gardens, and they had to restart. And I've mentioned it before, the priestesses who were replanting it were praying to the earth that she might give them seedlings. They were praying to Sophia or Gaia. And so it seemed, I think part of the signature of at least a certain group of humans. I mean, I think there might have been other dominion of humans, but when you get to these other places, invariably what you find out is that there was some tinkering. And then, of course, we have, you know, Homo domesticus mating with Homo sapiens. I mean, Homo sapiens domesticus and Homo sapiens sapiens. And I think that started to shrink the original stock. But apparently whatever they created in the form of women was hot. I mean, you know, that's kind of like one of the narratives. It's like, whatever kind of woman they created here, woo, everybody's going like, oh my, I gotta have some of that. I mean, apparently they did a pretty good job with the women. If you can tell by the writings. Okay, I'm gonna check in with the live chat. I've been kind of on my own here for a bit. Okay. All right. Here we go. Morphogenetic is MORPHO. That's morpho. Genetic. GENETIC. Morphogenetic. It holds the morphology of the species. Okay, good book, field. Da, da, da. Thank you, Sandy, for putting that in the chat. Oop, chat moved on me. Boy, this is a lovely chat. Ah. Yeah, the Michael Cremo stuff. There we go. I'm back away from the chat. The Michael Cremo stuff is really provocative. I mean, what he brings for, you have to do something with that material. Something in, to me, when you kind of get exposed to some of the stuff that he's discovered, and then of course he also talks about some of the other people who've run into problems for discovering things that do not fit the narrative. So something has to be done with that. So, and the other thing that occurred to me while I was driving are the series of videos on the New Earth YouTube channel. Because there is no series of kind of like archaeology and various data streams to kind of come up with a story. But the world that still had some semblance of a more wise culture appears to be hiding not much further than like 200 years ago. The one she has on the samurai is amazing because they actually have pictures of samurai, and many of them are not Asian, or not. When you look at them, you wouldn't go, that's Asian. I mean, these big mutton chop sideburns. I mean, and it's kind of something to keep quiet a little bit. There's a certain neoclassical style of building that was in Tokyo, Japan. It's in Hanoi, Vietnam. These aren't colonial. These were like kind of the buildings in places like Hanoi. There's a certain neoclassical, what's called neoclassical style, that is apparently the kind of the architecture of the survivor culture in modern times. The other thing that seems to have happened to the survivor culture is that they all, I guess, to get some kind of cover, adopted one of the Abrahamic faiths as cover, and were usually, well, from what I can tell, they weren't particularly pious. They had a state religion. But the New Earth videos, just time after time, show us how, like, almost, I mean, just barely over the horizon was still a fair amount of what she calls the survivor culture. And part of that, survivors of the cataclysms, whether it's, Atlantis, whatever. Originally was if she picked Atlantis. At this point, it's just like some of these are things we've been holding on to. There was a cataclysm. The ancient texts are full of an advanced civilization, a golden age of, things have gotten crappy since that golden age. So if you haven't, I hope, I'm not going to look into right away. I'm hoping some people are checking out the New Earth things. There's they will transport you. There's a sense to them, and especially with some of the imagery, you kind of quickly journey, and you end up kind of like, as you're watching this, you start getting downloads of memories. And to me, any video, anything on YouTube that's can actually kind of trigger that is highly recommended. And it's triggering memories of who we really are. Okay, I'm going to look at the live chat. I'm glad that you have liked it, Jessica. I mean, I think it's amazing. I've watched every video. I mean, you've seen how many videos. I've seen every one of those videos at least once. And the moment a new one comes out, I'm right on it. Okay, that's it, Doc. Mention the Sphere being Alliance. You gotta go, man. That whole thing astounds me. I had been a member of Project Avalon, but I had already left by the time I think he started there. But then he came to the other forum. I'm still a member. The One Truth Forum, and he kind of, for some reason, the things went south at Project Avalon. Then he came to the One Truth Forum, and a lot of Project Avalon's people came in, and suddenly the participation and membership of Tot like doubled. And it was all Corey, Sphere being Alliance, love one, rah, 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 rah. And it was goofy. And Stacy was on there and posted also. What a shit show. Oh my God. And then, as usual, it didn't work out. And then Tot lost. Tot is the One Truth. Lost, all those members who were there for Corey left. It was like a circus. It was like the circus came to town. I saw her, she had put out the one on Da Vinci's work. She had put it out about a week or two ago, and apparently she did a redo. I haven't watched the redo, but I did watch the first one she put out. But that last one about how the different techniques that it seems like they use to be able to get that kind of incredible lighting and shading and detail. But the other thing I really like about those old paintings, I mean, to get some of those vibrant blues, they would take lapis lazuli or azurite, or maybe both, and they would, grind them to a fine powder, then, mix them with whatever oils, whatever. And that's why some of those, some of that really wild red, that was made from cinnabar. Cinnabar is a beautiful deep red, kind of like a cherry red. But unfortunately, cinnabar is also a source of mercury. So when people, they were crushing cinnabar, was hazardous and probably best done outside with the breeze. So, that's one of the things that's amazing about those old paintings, is the fact that crushed gemstones were used for some of those colors. And so not only is it that kind of vibrant color, but it's the energy of that. I'm not surprised, Niche, because I mean, if I ever got into painting again, one of the first things I would, if I ever got into painting, not again, I would love to practice with that stuff, because those blues, the blues really catch my eye. And it's because I'm red-green colorblind. Blue really shows up for me. Doc, what I like about the Norse kind of shamanic map is, first of all, they have a map, and it's a really good map. Yggdrasil as a tree with the various worlds kind of posted about it in different areas. It's such a great map, because it's something that all of the shamans could relate to in their travels. And I also get that there was kind of, the other thing is, you have the ancient, the kind of more ancient gods, the Ainur, and then you have the more current ones like Odin and Thor in that group that I think fall into the Vanir. So you have oh no, is it the Ainur? See, this is the interesting thing also, where some of Tolkien's stuff comes through, because in their pleroma, in their heaven, with Eru, who's kind of sits a little bit like, kind of like a father god instead of an originator, although he's an originator too. And when when those beings are in heaven, they're the Ainur. When the ones who leave that domain and come to Arda to create Earth, they become the Valar. So I think it's very interesting that in the Norse thing you also have the Ainur. I think it's almost the same word, but then instead of having Valar, you have the Vanir. But the old ones, the Aesir. That's it. The Aesir and the Vanir. And the Aesir are kind of the old. You have the echoes of Mama. Gaia is echoed in them because they're very agricultural. They're very earth-based. It's when you get into the Vanir that now you start getting into dramatic characters, kind of like the Olympian gods. I feel that in the Norse pantheon, I think it's almost a setup for, once you get to a certain level of wisdom, you realize that when you're seeing the gods in any kind of like humanish or anthropos or interacting with each other the way humans do, there's a little bit of conflation of some ancestors. Conflation with ancestors. Oh man, let me get that thought back. And okay, and more like moral plays. That once you kind of, some of the the fuckery and buffoonery and heroism and all, again this kind of the soap opera of the gods, are actually soap operas for humans to learn about themselves. That in many ways, to properly see the gods is to see reflections of our own psyche. And that the squabbling and fuckery we see with the gods is about our own inner and personal kinds of wars, and then of course between each other. And that once you kind of learn what you can learn about, get some wisdom, then the gods kind of dissolve and become forces of nature and almost kind of become the Aesir once more. It's really there's a lot of beauty in it, but the whole, again, unfortunately the warrior culture got into it, and warrior culture was necessary because they were attacking the old people, because weapons was a big part of the parasitic movement. And but once that warrior culture came in and it kind of like, the sky gods and stuff, it really messed with things, unfortunately. Don't worry about blasting the text. To me, this is very complimentary. And sometimes, Doc, you have really valid things to say. So sometimes I might be here driving people crazy, and they're like reading you and going, "Oh, I'm glad Doc's putting something here." I was thinking about the Kabbalah last night, Doc. I don't. It was funny because I was going to just take just a peek at the Sephiroth. I mean, I've looked at the Sephiroth, the Tree of Life, many times. Because I just wanted to see kind of how it was populated. In many ways, to me, the Kabbalistic Tree of Life is kind of like, again, this is all our context, so it's all mimicry and borrowing and, that kind of motif. So I see the Kabbalistic Tree of Life as, their Sephiroth are kind of aeons, but they're aeons assembled in their kind of their own angular gematria type of stuff, and then with their own qualities like severity and mercy and the qualities that were to me unique to that narrative would be the best way I guess I can put it. Mari, I thought you were Sami. Or Sammy. No. Just hide my face for a minute here. Let you look at Gaia. Okay, I thought so, Mari. Thomas, I think I'm going to riff off your statement here. You say our identity is relatively valueless compared to our individual merits. And I think that's great. Because especially, I mean, with some of the conversations that we're having here about original humans and then newer arrivals and Rh negative blood. I mean, I think all of these, like in haplogroups, things like that, these are all markers that I think could be quite fascinating to investigate. But at the end of the day, it's what's in your heart, not what's in your genes. When we get to, the expression of our energetic eternal self, it really comes down to getting seated in wisdom. And if you can sit in wisdom, who cares what your genetics are? I mean, to me, being in the Gaia sphere, in this dream, in this influence, you become part of her matrix. You wouldn't be able to reproduce amongst your own or with others if she had not allowed that creation to be accepted into her human morphogenetic field. There'd be no energetic support for it. So clearly, she took in the new ones. What else was she going to do? And so the only residuals of some of that is, again, the psychology, whether or not the virus is active and implanted deeply. And that has nothing to do with, DNA might set up certain amounts of proclivities or latencies. That's just, I can hold that as a thought without getting lost in it or thinking that there needs to be a remedy of some sort. To me, the whole remedy for all of humanity is to tune in to know who your creator is, start dreaming with it, know that we have an adversary, how it conducts itself, and when we find ourselves observe ourselves conducting ourselves in that fashion, know that while we weren't looking, somebody whispered something into it that we bought into, and now we're doing something dumb. Reset, proceed forward. Okay, what's going on in the chat? And Doc Illusion now brings up the other part of it about roots, and that's where it's getting tricky is because one of the archontic things was to break with the ancestors. Reincarnation was everybody kind of knew that we were here. We were here to do something. The one life and you're judged is clearly the Babylonian stuff. And that screwed things up because you broke with your ancestors. When you could actually be in a tribe, family, or greater community where you knew you were coming back, at least if you liked it. I mean, the whole concept of ancestors was a continuum. I mean, you really, not only did you know the names of your ancestors and tell stories about your ancestors, there was also the fact that, somebody you're telling a story about might actually be sitting in a circle remembering that they were one of the people in the story. I mean, that kind of connectivity and continuity of both spirit and genetics. And one of the things the archontic systems did was first of all, to make the idea of reincarnation a heresy. Which was very bad for your health. Very bad for the health of villages and towns, countries. And that really, to me, that started breaking up the ancestor thing. They also corrupted the reverence of ancestors and called that ancestor worship. And of course, there can only be one. You can only worship in one direction, or you're going to hell. Lovely message. So, to me, that's one of the tricks, Doc, is that there's been a real interruption of what is such a natural process. So, although I think there's great value in finding roots and identification, but also as long as it's inclusive, inclusive in ways that make sense. Some chemicals don't match, but they're both fine chemicals. Don't mix is the word I wanted. Okay, so that was going in for little bits. My mother was Rh negative. I forget whether she was A or AB. And she had the hazel green eyes and crazy intellect. Although I can't say every Rh negative person I've met qualified for the intellect part. I'm reading the chat and catching up. Okay, well, I'm looking for... There we go. Wow, what a great chat. Yeah, isn't it funny? Yeah, heresy means choice. And that is what got introduced with the Babylonian systems. Choice was not an option. And so heresy became really bad. To be a heretic, I mean, that was a death sentence once Rome made Christianity the official religion, which was a really rotten thing to do to what looked like a pretty sweet movement. Wow. Thank you everybody for a really enjoyable chat. Looks like you're enjoying it, and when I take a little break and kind of regroup, it's a joy to go in there and read that. 3 owls. So how is everybody doing? I don't know if I asked that. Moose, I'm feeling great energy from you. I mean, I'm feeling good energy from everybody. I'm feeling particularly good energy from you. It's kind of like escaping its borders. Very nice. I like it. Yeah, this last moon, oh my God. That last full moon. Oi. Yeah, I do. That is such a fun mug. Yeah, the full moon. Man, am I glad I didn't have any responsibilities to attend to, besides feeding the stray cats. I don't know if ever anybody else felt that moon. There was an interesting kind of language play for me, and I don't. It was just something that, because it was the way somebody wrote it. It was a blue blood moon. You could say it was blue moon and a blood moon, but somebody had kind of put it. It's a blue blood moon. So you're looking at that and you're going, ooh, blue bloods. They have been a bit mischievous. Not all of them, but as a group. And then I'm thinking, okay, so we have a blue blood moon, an eclipse, and an eclipse. And all I could think of was the eclipse of the blue bloods. And there were a few things that I I can't even recall them now. A combination of news items, people stepping down from certain places, certain, if I recall, maybe some deaths. Boy, all kinds of people. Yeah, there's going to have to be some, the death, and even this flu, which I guess it's not being reported quite as much as, well, I guess it's being reported a bit because they're telling people to get their flu shots. But man, this last flu, I can't, it's hard for me to imagine that it wasn't dropped out of the sky. And it was just, I've never, I consider myself a folk doctor. So I kind of, there's all kinds of things that you can use for diagnosis, whether it's, the color of sputum, any number of things. And for what seemed to be a lung infection, was the weirdest lung infection I ever had. I don't ever remember having some kind of supposed infection one way or the other and bringing up the mucus that you have to bring up to stay breathing. And there's usually that kind of weird, I'll call it the bacterial or sick taste. This did not have that, what I'll call like the taste of pathogen. It was highly salty. I was like, man, I'm barely eating. I'm barely drinking. Where is all of this? Why does the predominant flavor of this is like too salty broth? And then and it was so, it was, so I was spitting it up into a canister. And, usually you'll see something, a combination of, cleared and the green and, and of course I'm a smoker. There'll be some brown in there too. This stuff was like froth. I never experienced anything come out of my lungs like what was coming out of my lungs with this last flu. Everything about it was odd. So, although it wasn't, it was, it kicked my ass, but it wasn't particularly long duration. Unfortunately, my roommates seemed to be going through another round. They were spraying here in Floy. So their greasy marks in the sky. Was quite upset. Well, quite upset. I was, it was just like, you motherfuckers. Of course, you can't wish they fall out of the sky because they might fall on somebody. But I think, just this seemed to be a really concerted effort to kill people. And that was the other thing, was there was a signature I've never really felt with a pathogen before. It was like this actually had anger in it. It was probably one of the most bizarre pathogens I've ever had pass through me. And I pay attention, there's, you really get in touch with my body, what's going on here. And it was like an alien strain, the Andromeda strain. That's okay. You be well, Thomas. Yeah, the flu appeared to be weaponized nature. I wouldn't know what else to call it. And and it appears it's a fairly lethal flu. I like Bitcoin. It's so funny. I almost did a joke on Bit and Byte about like don't like Bitcoin Byte or something like that. But I don't like to pick on Thomas and his Bitcoin. That's his sweetheart. Bitcoin is his honey. Did anybody else experience anything unique about this last full moon? I'm wondering. Oh, the 15th is also the new moon. It's also the beginning of the Chinese New Year. So the 15th represents a new year for a billion or so people. That will have an energetic impact. And it's a new moon, and it's partial eclipse. So the middle of this month should be some more roller coastering. Because that's probably the best metaphor, because there were some really, really good highs. And man, there have been a few dips. Oh, most of the time the dips seem to be associated with these health things. Fortunately, I seem to, each one is passing through me quicker and quicker. And they all have some. I get something personally, like shamanic, from each one of them. Although the best ones are the ones where I'm almost near dying, and it's probably best not to play with that too much, because well, it's a little bit of a tightrope walk. I'm noticing more and more, and that's one of the things. Read full moon. I became the mountain. Ooh. Now that is potent. I won't read it. It's there in the chat, but I think Rock should put something in very potent. More and more, at least in my life, and even with other people I talk to, there's more synchronicity with the Earth cycles, whether they're full moons and new moons, whether they're Candlemas, Imbolc, the solstice that we had, the equinox that's coming. We're really, we've really been bouncing off of organic and natural events. We'll mark them on the same. We'll say, "Oh, new moon's on the 15th," but I don't know about you, and I kind of sensing in other people's language where it's kind of like how we're going to make sure that we are aware of this energy, and we'll use the calendar is becoming more of almost a tracker for what's the celestial movements, and it feels good. It feels like a return into organic living in Sophia's dream from her platform, looking at the sky and knowing that platform, that particular view and what we could experience and interact with is part of the design of our reality. A design with us in mind, as it should be. My friend's girlfriend, the Wailing Witches. Raksha Bone Mother has come up and a few. I think it was in some live chats where people were just saying some stuff, and I had to give him a little bit of Bone Mother. Bone Mother seemed to be pretty good for boneheads, although I think it just kind of went over. But had to say my piece. But I went. We kind of been going between one, it'll be 18 degrees. And then, not get above freezing one day, and then it's in 40s, in the 50s, and it goes down. And I did a little garden last year, last growing season. And I got some stuff, mainly kale. My soil was a little compact. I didn't spread my seeds out enough. I overcrowded them. It was an experiment, but I did get stuff out of there. And I was going out and I was pulling out the beets that I hadn't pulled up, and I was noticing the soil. The soil got a lot more friable, as it's called. Friable is the word. I think as friable is that word. Kind of like more crumbly. Some people might say it friable. That's powerful stuff, Niche. My condolences as well. Oh, okay, good. Good. I have to admit, that kind of stuff, gets it's a little tricky for an Aspie to navigate. Because you want to respond correctly, and until you kind of have that cue, it's kind of almost guessing. I mean, if I were to speak of my parents' death and to go, "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that," it would be like, that's not why I brought it up. It's just kind of like, So it is like how I would react to it, and so you want to do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But when you're an Aspie, that formula doesn't always work out so well, because what I would have others do unto me isn't always what they would want to have done unto them. There's enough of a kind of perceptual difference where the golden rule gets a little tricky. That's part of the fun. Well, I mean, that's what I'm trying to, I'm just trying to be appropriate. And so what I'll do is I'll look at, I'll see, somebody like Lee say something, and I'll go, oh yeah, that's right. I actually have to kind of clue of other people, because, I have two dead parents too. And I just, it's not, I'd love to have them around. I've got all kinds of things I've thought about since then. But I've had conversations with them. Anytime I have like, oh man, I wish I could have said, oh, wait a second. Go into an altered state, and we have those conversations, and we don't let death be a veil or a wall of communication. Not much to work out with Dad's mom. There's not really much to work out. It's just like, it was combative. It was two Aspies, strong wills, sound intellects, slightly different views on things. But I've gotten sweeter, and sometimes I just have to go, that part when you were still around, you know what I would have done? I would have done this. She goes, I know you would have. So it's all good. It all works out very nicely. Yeah, I mean, I've found, especially, like I said, my mom is the one that was like, there was, you know, my dad and I were like buddies. So there was no issues there. Yeah, mom had some disappointments. Yeah, but it's really kind of nice to be able to fix that stuff after the fact. And I'm glad that it sounds familiar, Lee, because I think there are a lot of people who I feel are, you know, I mean, really carry some heavy wounds because they feel there's no way to address their deceased ones. And that must be a difficult place to be in. I can imagine the pain. I mean, I know I know my own pain that makes me, you know, can we have a meeting here? And then it gets fixed. But if it couldn't get fixed, if I didn't have that open to me, that could affect my health. Carrying that kind of hurt around can make you sick. Here I'm getting ready to drink out of my glass bottle, and I have my lovely owls. Yeah, I just saw, you know, on a delay, I just saw me pull up that bottle, and I'm drinking ginger tea. And the color, I don't know if you ever saw, if you remember A Living Color, Damon Wayans used to play a bum, and he had a jar that had some kind of juice in it and something floating in it, you know. So when I see this in the camera, I'm going, ooh, I look like the homeless person with the weird juice in the jar that Damon Wayans played on Living Color. That was a fairly funny skit. And it's going back a few decades, when I still watch TV. You remember the pickle jar, right? I mean, that was just so funny. You know, Kalendal, what's pretty funny, especially about my mother, she certainly is more in touch with her I guess, you know, eternal self, but she's still quite an imp. It's I've actually had to ban her occasionally, you know, kind of like say, okay, you need to, you know, just because we had a conversation doesn't mean you need to show up all the time. Yeah, she's really still quite a character. Dad's just about as mellow as he was in life. Hey, Doc, you still with us? I haven't seen you post in a bit. I look forward to speaking with you, Raksha. Yeah. Last thing Kalendal said, it's weird to see myself acting like my parents did. When I was younger, and I was dealing with my not yet born son, my son hadn't been born, but his brother and sisters were already around. And me being in that kind of thing, and when they would annoy me and I would see certain, I really wasn't ready for any of that. Matter of fact, don't know that I'd ever be ready for that. This trip was not about family, at least, you know, for me. So I remember, you know, sometimes seeing a reaction, it's like, oh man, this is the stuff This is the stuff that I'm busting my father. You know, if I had any complaints, it would be like just how I'm being right now with these kids. This is exactly where my father fucked up, in my opinion. You know, we all fuck up. And it was, you know, it was for it. I got a little grip on it, but man, it was kind of annoying. It was kind of creepy. He was still alive then too. And I managed. It's yeah. That's pretty interesting. Calendal. Now my mother, I'm so much like, I mean, because we're both Aspies. There's, and you know, certain traits that Aspies share. I won't get into. There was a lot of commonality, but almost I don't have any of her behaviors. But man, it's like, you know, those moments where like you're ghosting one of your parents through you, and pretty. I mean, that's a real, to me, an ancestral, genetic, pretty fabulous way for you to kind of observe this other intelligence that's your body, that your higher being, your more eternal being is traveling with. Yeah. Mari, it's funny with the Aspie thing. My mother and I were never diagnosed. It was when my son was born in New York, and his mom decided she wanted to return to Oregon, and she did. So he left when he was 5 months old, and he was out of communication because I got married, and that created all kinds of stupidity. But when he was 12, his mother got a hold and said, you know, your son's asking for you. And I said, oh, great. let's do this. And she said, well, he's been diagnosed with Asperger's, and I need you to read this paper before you interact with him, because I don't want you treating him like a retard. So, you know, it's, you know, no horror, you know, a couple, you know, probably about 3 or 4 pages. I get through a few paragraphs, it's like, wait a second here. This is me. This is my mom. Holy cow. So then you start seeing, you know, mom transmitted it to me, and then I shared it with my son. Although I don't see any of this, I mean, I'm very, very firm. It's my personal gnosis about creating the conditions of my birth, who my parents were, genetics, and all the rest of that stuff. So obviously I knew there was a good chance because of my mom, that I could pick up that gene. For all I know, I hoped, make sure that it did happen. And I feel that's the same thing with my son. So in a certain way, there's a certain kind of continuum of this different perspective of the world. Same biology, but slightly different neurology. It's kind of an interesting genetic lineage. And a little and it is kind of tricky to share those experiences with others. But that's one, and it's, a lot of times I won't even tell people in private, because it's not, again, it's, I always say I am an Aspie. I've never said my son has Asperger's. We don't have shit. We are something. So there's never any of that. If anything, if I throw it out there, it's because if I seem a little odd to you, please don't think I'm a dick. I'm just wired a little different. Because there can be misunderstandings between the two neurologies. And Raksha has been great for me. He has some personal experience, and then there's just who Raksha is. I don't know that Raksha would necessarily have to have the personal experience. I'm quite, any time we have knowledge and then actually have hands-on, certainly enhances things. But my sense is that even if Raksha didn't not have close-up understanding of the spectrum, as they call it, he would still be on board. Because he's Raksha. And my friend, and that is a blessing. Moose brother. Yeah, I can be mushy. I can be mushy. Oh, so I hope everybody talking. I'm thinking, of us as a community. How about that last Nox Mente with Walter Bosley? Oh man, was that cool? That was good. And when he brought up Hecate, or Hecate, I like that pronounced Hecate. That was like goosebumps and shiver time. That was probably the most open I ever heard him. And I know that you know this, Nish, and I'm quite sure other people who can hear. Man, he's got a lot of genetic memory he is quite aware of, and just because it won't pass the muster of it's because it's totally unprovable, and he's not really quite in shamanic circles yet, where nobody cares if you can prove it. Let's just share it. And he was kind of getting into that zone a little bit with you. He was kind of drifting into shamanic, where it's like, well, maybe I don't have to be Walter Bosley researcher with all, with the hardcore information. Maybe I can just kind of share something from out of my psyche. And, he's an RH negative. My mom was RH negative. And there's definitely a vibe to that. And it's a little, it's not the majority RH factor. So there's a little uniqueness in that vibration. But as he was speaking, I'm going, man, this guy is sitting on a ton of information, and it's not subliminal for me either. I mean, he's sitting on a ton of information. So as soon as I have a little money, I want to start his Empire of the Wheel, because I've heard him speak on it, and I know the Empire of the Wheel and the survivors that are going on in New Earth, they tie together. Obviously, all of our real history ties together. And it's really interesting hearing him speak about, oh, wow. Okay, I was reading about Temu, going to be on Nox Mente. And when Walter Bosley discusses Nimza, but specifically these flying machines, and I have to admit, when he talks about that, it makes me say, you know who I want to read, or at least a book or two? Jules Verne. Because if you've ever, just even some of the imagery from Jules Verne, and then when Walter Bosley explains how these flying machines that had this kind of rotating drum that you had to pour a liquid on. I mean, it's really funny how, you have people, like you're like sitting there, and I guess you're turning a wheel with your legs at some point and pouring liquid on, actually from like a jug or something that goes on to something that's spinning, and all this ends up creating the levitation or the anti-gravitational field that allows this craft to then travel. And here is this, here's this anti-graft technology that, is basically, something you can, I guess you can put together that they built, roughly in their garages almost. And then, with, the imagery of like, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and then and I guess a movie I saw once was the League of Amazing Gentlemen, Astounding Gentlemen, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, I think maybe. Which seemed to be kind of, when you look at that, you're going, ooh, this seems a little bit, of a group of bloodline type people that didn't become demonic, we'll say. And one of the interesting things, like when Walter Bosley is talking about the elites who were involved with these flying machines, these are people who had PhDs in the humanities, engineers. I mean, these were elite that were elite as performance level human beings. And it seemed to me that they, they're doing this stuff in public, so it looks like they're trying to, let everybody know, hey, look what's developing. And then it seems like there's another branch of that same kind of family that says, no, we do not do nice things for the farm animals. They're farm animals. Don't give them names. Don't get too cozy with them. When you grow up on a farm, it's usually, the last thing you want to do is have your kid name an animal that you're going to do something nasty to. So they're just like with Sylvie's Survivor series, you kind of get this very these old families. There's some part of humanity that kept some of the knowledge and wisdom and technology, and they seem to have bifurcated. The world supported the archontic. It's an archontic world, so there's plenty of archontic support. And then you have to wonder, either these people just got quiet, or the concept of a breakaway civilization. So to me, the whole Walter Bosley Empire of the Wheel stuff is something I want to read. The last time I had some money, I bought Anton Park's book. Before that, I bought some Joseph Farrell books. So my next book purchases will be Walter Bosley books, because based on what he didn't let leak out and what he did let leak out from his psyche in that extraordinary show Nox Mente that they did, it's like, oh, this guy is just sitting on so much juiciness, that he, for any number of reasons, he's keeping close to his chest. But did you get a sense of that, Niche, that like, man, he's got a lot of goods? I'll be right back. Oh, Dead of Lore channel, okay. Okay, so um, I'm ready to start winding down a little bit. I really have had a good time tonight. And like I said, at 7 o'clock my time, like let's say 2 hours before showtime, I wasn't sure how I was going to make it. Fortunately, my roomies let me borrow the car. I did. Just took a little trip, about 45 minutes. Came back, all inspired, ready to go. I'm going to check out Den of Lore. It's getting harder and harder for me to find anything, because sometimes I just like to put something on and then just kind of lay back and listen to it. And there's so much of stuff I put on. It's almost as soon as I start listening, just feels agitating. And then of course sometimes it's just there is so little new, which is one of the reasons I love John Lash, because a lot of times he'll share. He's doing sky watching almost probably every night or any night he can, and that's in the moment kind of intel, and I just love that when he shares that. And from what I know of, he intends to try and find some way of teaching people that. And there's he said one of the ways is, I guess, go to some, one of those sky chart things and just kind of get used to looking at the night sky and what it would look like if you didn't have a bunch of street lights. And he's in Andalusia, Spain, so I'm quite sure he gets an incredible night sky. All right, everybody. So thank you very much. And if you would like to, please leave a thumbs up. Or there's somebody who seems to like to give me thumbs down. I can't imagine they're going to stop this week. So, just for some balance. Okay, so my love to you all, and we'll be getting together again next week. And maybe I'll see you in a live chat at Nox Mente with Tamu Nagina. And I think that'll be it for now. Oh, where's my... Okay. So I'm going to stop the streaming.